I stood in the softly lit hallway leading to the private dining room, my heart thudding against my ribs. Tonight was supposed to be an ordinary shift at La Fenice, the upscale restaurant where I worked, but nothing felt ordinary now. My manager's warning echoed in my ears. "This table is VIP, Elena. Whatever they need, you provide it. No mistakes." His usual easygoing demeanor had been replaced with an anxious urgency that unnerved me. Still, I needed this job, and I'd faced worse than demanding customers before. After a steadying breath, I pushed open the heavy door. The room was bathed in a warm golden glow, cast by an ornate chandelier. A round table occupied the center, surrounded by men in sharp suits. Their conversation hushed the instant I entered. 6 pairs of eyes turned toward me, assessing. I forced a polite smile and stepped forward, keenly aware of how small I felt in the presence of such commanding men. "Good evening, gentlemen," I said, praying my voice didn't tremble. "Welcome to La Fenice. I'm Elena, and I'll be your server tonight. May I start you off with some drinks?" I kept my posture straight and professional as I circled the table, pen and pad in hand to take their orders. My black uniform, crisp shirt and pencil skirt, felt suddenly too tight, as if it might betray the rapid pounding of my heart. One by one, the men answered. Quiet murmurs of whiskey, red wine, still water. They barely looked at me, more interested in resuming their private conversation. That was fine with me. Invisibility was my specialty after all. But when I reached the last chair, I sensed rather than saw that the man seated there had not spoken. Slowly, I lifted my gaze. He sat slightly apart from the others by aura alone, even at the round table. Dark hair swept back in a neat, old-world style, a strong jaw accentuated by a trim beard. His suit was charcoal gray, impeccably tailored over broad shoulders. He was younger than the rest, perhaps mid-30s, but held himself with an authority that made the others defer to him. This must be the boss, I realized with a jolt. When our eyes met, I inhaled sharply. His eyes were a deep obsidian, intense under heavy brows. They pinned me in place, calculating, cold. I'd been stared at by plenty of customers, some friendly, some lecherous, some plain dismissive. This man's stare was something else entirely. A quiet, contained threat, and curiosity all at once. I felt heat rise to my cheeks despite myself. "Signore, a drink for you," I prompted gently, surprised by how steady I managed to sound. He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he continued to inspect me. I fought the urge to fidget under that gaze. After an interminable beat, he spoke, voice low and smooth with a faint Italian accent. "A glass of Barolo, per favore," he said. Then, as I nodded and made a note, he added, "Elena, is it? How long have you worked here?" The question was casual enough, but something in his tone made it feel like an interrogation. "Almost a year now, sir," I replied softly. My eyes flickered to the thick silver ring on his right hand, emblazoned with a symbol that looked like a winged lion. I wondered if it meant something, maybe a family crest. I quickly cast my eyes down, not wanting to seem rude. He hummed, neither displeased nor satisfied. The silence stretched uncomfortably. I realized the others were waiting for his order to be completed before continuing. Finally, he gave a slight nod, dismissing me. I murmured an apology and retreated from that heavy stare. As I gathered their drink orders, the men's conversation resumed in low, guarded tones. I wasn't trying to eavesdrop, but in the hush of the private room, snippets were unavoidable. "Shipment arriving Friday," one man murmured. Another responded, "The port, protection money." The words made my stomach tighten. They were discussing something that sounded dangerous, certainly not normal dinner chatter. I forced myself to focus on the task, deliver the drink orders, then get out. Returning with a tray of crystal glasses and bottles, I set them down carefully on the table. My hand only shook slightly as I poured the boss's Barolo, the rich red wine swirling into his glass. He watched me still, a hawk observing a mouse. "Grazie," he said quietly when I finished, surprising me. His politeness seemed at odds with the menace in his eyes. "Prego, signore," I replied, stepping back. I hoped that was the end of it, but fate was rarely so kind. As I moved behind the boss to pour water for an older gentleman with graying temples, that man shifted and bumped my arm just as I tipped the pitcher. Water sloshed over the rim, splashing onto the tablecloth and the man's expensive suit sleeve. My breath caught. Oh no. "Mi dispiace. I'm so sorry," I blurted out, grabbing my service towel to dab at the spill. The older man's face reddened in anger and he jerked his arm away, cursing under his breath. His reaction was explosive. "Stupid girl," he snarled in Italian. "Watch what you're doing." My cheeks burned with embarrassment and fear. I knew VIP guests could be temperamental, but something told me these men were far less forgiving than the usual wealthy diners. "It was an accident," I apologized again, my voice cracking slightly. I dared a glance toward the head of the table. The dark-eyed boss was still watching, expression unreadable, but his gaze flicked to the older man and back to me. Before I could retreat, the older gentleman grabbed my wrist tightly. Pain lanced up my arm as his fingers dug in. "These clothes cost more than you make in a year," he hissed. I opened my mouth, heart hammering, unsure whether to plead or demand he let go. Tears pricked at the corners of my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. "Enough!" came a cold command from behind me. The pressure on my wrist vanished as the older man immediately released me, muttering, "Scusa, Don Dante." I stepped back hastily, cradling my wrist against my chest. The boss, Dante, had spoken that single word with quiet authority, and it had instant effect. My fingers trembled as I smoothed my apron, trying to regain composure. Dante turned his attention to me. "Go fetch another napkin and more water," he said. Tone calm, as if nothing had happened. I nodded gratefully and made my escape from the room. Out in the hall, I exhaled shakily. My wrist throbbed where the man had grabbed me. The encounter rattled me more than it should have. I'd dealt with my share of aggressive men in the past. An involuntary shudder ran through me at the memory of hands much crueler than a drunken diner's. But something about those 6 men set off every alarm bell in my body. I had a sinking feeling I knew why. Anyone local to Naples heard whispers, rumors of powerful families that ran the city's underworld. Organized crime, the Camorra. Could these men be? "Pull it together," I whispered to myself. I couldn't afford to lose this job by freaking out at a mere suspicion. Still, as I retrieved a fresh jug of water and napkins, I noticed my hand was not just trembling, it was shaking. To calm myself, I took a moment by the kitchen doorway and watched the bustle of the staff inside. Normalcy. Safety. I pressed the cool jug to my overheated forehead. Just one more round in that room and they'd likely be eating in peace, without needing me hovering. I could get through this. Holding my head high, I re-entered the private dining room. The men had resumed their discussions. I kept my eyes down, aiming straight for the older gentleman who had insulted me. He pointedly avoided looking at me as I replaced his soggy napkin with a fresh one and refilled his water. I could feel Dante's gaze following my every movement. My skin prickled under that scrutiny, but I did not dare meet his eyes again. As I rounded the table to discreetly tidy the spill, I caught a few more murmured words from the gentleman. "If Moretti doesn't comply, handle it our way," said one gravelly voice. Another responded, "Federico won't risk open war. Not yet." My pulse quickened. They weren't even trying to hide it now. They were definitely discussing something dangerous. A rivalry? Perhaps 2 families? The names were unfamiliar, but the context sounded ominous. I swallowed, focusing on my task. I needed to get out of here. The last corner of the tablecloth was nearly dry under my towel when I realized the conversation had stopped again. Slowly, I looked up. Dante was watching me with an intensity that rooted me to the spot. In his hand, he held a slim cell phone which he tapped lightly against the table, as if considering something. The others were silent, waiting on him. My mouth went dry. Had I lingered too long? Had I heard too much? I lowered my gaze and stepped back. "Pardon me," I mumbled, clutching my tray to my chest like a shield. Without waiting for a response, I turned and headed toward the door, heart in my throat. 1 step, 2 steps. Almost there. I could feel the weight of their stares between my shoulder blades. Just a few more seconds, and I'd be free in the hall, away from whatever was happening here. My fingers wrapped around the door handle. "Stop." The single English word, spoken in a deep tone, froze me mid-step. Not a shout, but a command, calm, assured, lethal. I turned my head back slightly, my hand still on the door. Dante had risen from his seat. "Close the door, Elena," he said evenly. A spike of fear shot through me. For a moment I couldn't move. His dark eyes bored into mine from across the room. The other men glanced between us, alert now, like wolves catching the scent of prey. My instincts screamed to run, but my survival sense knew better. Slowly, I let the door swing shut. "Come here," Dante ordered, voice soft, but impossible to disobey. My feet carried me forward before I had fully processed the decision. The room felt suddenly colder. I stopped a few feet from him, my gaze fixed on the polished toes of his expensive shoes. "Look at me," he said. Reluctantly, I raised my eyes. His expression was unreadable. "What did you hear?" A jolt of panic constricted my chest. They knew I'd overheard their conversation. My mind raced. Should I lie? I couldn't admit to hearing talk of war or names. That felt like signing my own death warrant. But if I lied and they knew, I swallowed hard, trying to wet my dry throat. Nothing, sir. I was just cleaning." The man who had grabbed my wrist earlier scoffed, but Dante held up a hand to silence him. He stepped closer. I could smell his cologne now, smoky and woodsy, like cedar, mixed with the faint scent of wine. He was close enough that I had to tilt my chin up to keep eye contact. "Elena," he murmured, almost gently, "you're shaking." His voice held a note of something. Concern? It made no sense. I'm just cold, signore," I managed. A lie so flimsy neither of us believed it. His eyes narrowed, and a ghost of a humorless smile touched his lips. "A shame," Dante exhaled slowly, then his gaze flicked to one of the burly men standing by the door, one of his bodyguards who had been silent all evening. In Italian, Dante gave the order that turned my blood to ice. "Non lasciarla andare." His voice was quiet, but firm. "Don't let her leave." 2 of Dante's men flanked me as I was led out of the private room, my heart pounding in my throat. The door closed behind us with a heavy click, cutting off the low murmur of voices before it could resume. One guard, a mountain of a man with a shaved head, stood by my side. The other took position at the end of the corridor, arms folded. I was effectively caged, stuck in this dim back hallway of La Fenice with nowhere to run. The taller guard's name tag, oddly domestic on his expensive suit, read Vincenzo, though I doubted that was the name his friends used. He towered over me, saying nothing, his expression blank as stone. I tried a shaky smile. I really didn't hear anything, I offered quietly in Italian, voice barely above a whisper. Vincenzo gave no response, not even a glance in my direction. It was like speaking to a statue. My mind whirled with possibilities of what might happen next, each more terrifying than the last. Were they going to hurt me? Kill me? A cold sweat broke out on my back. I thought about making a run for it. But the second guard at the corridor's end was built like a bulldozer and likely just as fast. Even if by some miracle I slipped past, where would I go? They probably had men posted at the restaurant exits by now. And calling the police, was that even an option? If these men truly were camorristi, the police might be the least of my worries. Involving law enforcement could put me and anyone I cared about in even more danger. No, I had to handle this carefully. Minutes ticked by, each one an agony of uncertainty. The muffled sounds of diners in the main hall filtered faintly down the corridor, oblivious to my predicament. At one point, the door to the private room opened and one of the suited men, the one who had grabbed me, stepped out. My pulse spiked. He cast a cold look my way, saying nothing as he walked past us and out to the main dining room, likely to use the restroom or make a call. I shrank back instinctively, but the man barely acknowledged me. It was as if, once Dante had intervened, I ceased to exist for that older man. Yet his earlier fury replayed in my head, and I rubbed my wrist where bruises were already forming. The memory of Dante's quiet enough echoed. For reasons I couldn't fathom, he had stopped the man from hurting me further. Why? Perhaps he thought only he had the right to decide my fate now. Eventually, after what felt like an hour, but may have been only 15 minutes, the private room door swung open again. Dante emerged, buttoning his suit jacket with unhurried grace. The meeting must have concluded. Behind him, the other men filtered out, their expressions carefully neutral. They passed by me without a word, though I felt their curious glances. I kept my eyes glued to the polished floorboards. The older gentleman who had caused the spill didn't even spare me a look, his face strained as if still angry, or perhaps embarrassed by Dante's rebuke. Once the others had departed down the hall, Dante stood before me in the now quiet corridor. It was just him, myself, and Vincenzo, looming a few steps away. Dante regarded me silently for a moment. Without the others around, he seemed even more imposing somehow, his presence expanding to fill the hall. I swallowed hard, gathering courage I didn't truly feel. "Signore, please," I began, forcing myself to meet those dark eyes. "I swear I won't say a word to anyone. I didn't even really understand what you were discussing. I'll forget I ever heard anything. Just let me go home." Dante tilted his head slightly, considering me. In the silence, I heard the distant clink of cutlery from the main dining area, and the thud of my own heartbeat in my ears. "What do you think you heard?" he asked calmly. I hesitated. Was this a trap? If I admitted I heard words like war or Moretti, would that condemn me? But claiming total ignorance might insult his intelligence. Not much, I said carefully. Something about someone not complying and handling things your way. My voice trembled despite my effort to keep it even. But I don't know what any of it meant, I promise. I was just focused on cleaning the spill. Dante stepped closer until he was mere inches away. The subtle cologne I'd noticed earlier was more pronounced now, a smoky, leathery scent that made my head light. He reached out, and I flinched instinctively, but he only plucked the order pad and pen from my apron pocket. His fingers brushed my hip through the apron fabric, sending an unexpected jolt through me. He flipped open the small notebook, scanning the pages where I'd scribbled drink orders, as if expecting to find something incriminating. After a moment, he seemed satisfied, and returned it to my pocket with the same eerie gentleness. Your hands, he said, nodding at them. I realized belatedly that I had them half raised in a defensive posture since his sudden movement. Slowly, I lowered them to my sides. Empty, I murmured, holding them out briefly. No recorder. No phone. It's in my locker. My phone really was in my locker in the staff room. Per restaurant policy, to avoid servers being distracted. That likely worked in my favor. They knew I hadn't been able to call anyone while inside. Dante's intense stare flickered to my face. Smart policy. He paused, then asked almost conversationally, Elena, do you know who I am? A shiver danced along my spine at the question. My manager's voice echoed, very important people. And the way these men acted, the snippets of conversation, the way this one commanded obedience. I bit my lip. I have an idea, I confessed softly, but only rumors. His lips curved in a faint approximation of a smile. Rumors? He repeated. Let's clarify then. My name is Dante Accardi. He watched me for recognition. I blinked. The name was not one I knew, but that meant little. I'm not from Naples originally, and I'd kept my head down since moving here. I see that doesn't mean anything to you, Dante observed when I failed to react. Perhaps that's for the best. He glanced back at Vincenzo and gave a curt nod. The burly guard shifted, but remained at a respectful distance. Dante continued, voice measured and formal. Elena, I'm a businessman of sorts, and some of my dealings require privacy. I'm sure you understand. His tone was polite, but beneath it lay steel. I understand, I whispered. My eyes darted to Vincenzo, whose impassive gaze made my stomach knot. I won't breathe a word, Signora Accardi, to anyone, I swear it. Dante studied me for another long moment, as if weighing the sincerity of my words. Then, to my surprise, he extended a hand toward my face. I froze as his thumb lightly skimmed my cheek. You're pale, he remarked quietly. Scared, his thumb moved down, gently tracing along my jaw where I realized I was trembling. You should be. If you're lying to me, Elena, the consequences will be severe. The gentle stroke of his thumb belied the threat in his words, a contradiction that left me breathless with fear and something else I couldn't name. His hand dropped. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding. Dante turned to Vincenzo. Have someone fetch her belongings. We're leaving. I tensed. Leaving? My voice wavered when I dared to ask, Where are you taking me? Dante glanced over his shoulder at me. Relax, I'm taking you home. He paused, then added, You've had a shock. It's the least I can do after my associate's behavior. I didn't know what to say to that. The offer, if one could call it that, sounded almost considerate, but I had no doubt it was also about control. If he escorted me home, he'd learn where I lived. A subtle message. We can find you anytime. Yet refusing might offend him, and I was in no position to argue. Vincenzo had already strode off, presumably to retrieve my coat and phone from the staff locker area. Dante angled his head toward the exit. After you, he said, gesturing with a polite bend of his arm, as if we were simply leaving a dinner party. Trembling legs carried me forward. As we walked through the main dining area, the clink of silverware and low murmur of patron conversations washed over me, bizarre in their normalcy. I spotted my manager hovering near the reception desk, wringing his hands. His eyes widened when he saw Dante beside me. Dante gave a slight, reassuring nod in the manager's direction. I realized Dante must be a silent partner or investor here. How else would the manager know to be so afraid? Or perhaps he just knew Dante by reputation. Either way, no help would come from that quarter. My boss would sooner pretend he saw nothing than risk crossing a man like this. Within a minute, Vincenzo caught up, holding my threadbare gray coat and handbag. I muttered a thank you as I took them, slipping the coat on. It did little to ward off the chill that was more from shock than the winter air. Dante led the way outside. The night was brisk. The city sounds muted on this quieter street. Parked at the curb was a sleek black Maserati. Another guard, who had been waiting by the car, opened the rear door at Dante's approach. With a light touch at my elbow, Dante guided me into the back seat. I could feel the strength in that touch even through my coat, a reminder of just how effortlessly he could overpower me if he chose. He slid in beside me, the leather seat shifting under his weight. Vincenzo took the front passenger side, and the driver shut our door before moving around to the wheel. As the car pulled smoothly away from the curb, I realized I was now truly alone with the Mafia boss who held my life in his hands. The privacy partition was up, separating us from the driver and Vincenzo. The car interior was dim, lit only by the dashboard glow. For a few minutes, neither of us spoke. I clutched my handbag in my lap, knuckles white, and stared out the window at the passing lights of Naples. My mind raced, trying to recall if my apartment was tidy, an absurd concern given the circumstances, but panic latches onto the mundane. Which district? Dante's voice cut through the quiet, making me jump. He was asking where I lived. Chiaia? I replied softly, naming the relatively safe but modest neighborhood where I rented a tiny flat. It was across town. Did he already know that? Possibly, if his network was as good as I imagined. His men might have checked my ID or employment records by now. Dante gave an address to the driver, confirming my suspicion that he knew exactly where to go. My stomach did a nervous flip, so much for anonymity. He seemed content to ride in silence after that, and I was too frightened to attempt small talk. As the car navigated the winding roads, I dared a glance at Dante from the corner of my eye. He was relaxed against the leather, one arm resting on the back of the seat, behind me, though not touching. His profile was illuminated intermittently by streetlights. Strong, composed, utterly unreadable. That cold calm he wore was almost more terrifying than open anger. What was he thinking right now? Planning what to do with me? Or was I already a negligible detail in his night? Unable to stand the tension, I mustered a scrap of courage. Thank you for not hurting me back there. It was a risk to speak, but gratitude was safer than silence, perhaps. Dante turned his head slightly, those dark eyes flicking to me. You can thank me by keeping your word, he replied. Make sure my trust isn't misplaced. I nodded quickly. It isn't, I promise. I just want to live my life, Signor Accardi. I won't get in your way. My voice sounded small and earnest. I meant every word, whatever shadow world he inhabited. I wanted no part of it, nor did I intend to cause trouble by blabbing about what I'd overheard. Who would I even tell? I had no close friends here yet, no one I confided in beyond surface pleasantries. I was essentially alone in Naples. Alone in trying to rebuild my life, a life that now precariously hinged on the goodwill of the man beside me. He studied me for a heartbeat longer, then gave a single nod, as if a decision had been reached internally. Buono. Good. The rest of the ride passed in charged silence. My mind wandered unbidden to the life I had fled before coming here. Another man who had tried to control me, who left me with scars that still ached in my quieter moments. I'd thought escaping to Italy, waitressing under a false surname, and keeping my head down would keep me safe. Now I had landed right in the lap of danger again. Perhaps fate had a cruel sense of humor. Soon the car rolled to a gentle stop in front of my apartment building, a narrow, aging structure on a side street that overlooked a small piazza. My heart thumped with relief at the sight of the familiar green door and the darkened windows of my neighbors. Home, or something like it. The driver stepped out to open the door for us. Dante exited first, then offered me his hand. I hesitated but took it, allowing him to help me out of the low-slung car. His palm was warm and firm around mine. Once I was steady on the sidewalk, he released me, but not before his gaze swept the quiet street, alert and searching for any potential threat. It was subtle, just a slight tensing of his frame, the way his chin lifted as he looked into the shadows. It struck me then that even here, in a seemingly mundane moment, Dante was ever the predator keeping watch. Did he ever truly relax? Which unit? He asked quietly, eyes now on the building. 3rd floor, Unit 3B, I said. My voice was steadier now that we were on my turf, however meager it was. To my surprise, Dante moved to accompany me to the door. You don't have to, I began. meaning to say he needn't come up, but I bit my tongue at his sharp glance. "I'll see you inside, Elena," he said firmly, leaving no room for argument. Perhaps he wanted the final assurance that I wasn't about to run straight to the phone and call the police, or call anyone. Or maybe he simply wanted to confirm this was truly my residence and not a lie. I cast an apologetic glance to the driver and guard lingering by the car, as if I were inconveniencing them, then inwardly laughed at myself. Why did I care what they thought when my very life was in limbo? Still, politeness dies hard. Fishing my keys from my handbag, I led Dante up the narrow stairwell to the 3rd floor. The building was old, the lights flickered, and the scent of marinara and something fried hung in the air. My downstairs neighbor liked late-night cooking. I prayed none of my neighbors stepped out to see this elegant, dangerous man trailing behind me. At my door, I fumbled with the key in my nervousness. Dante's presence loomed at my back. Not touching, but I could sense his body heat. Finally, the lock turned and I pushed the door open. I flicked on a lamp inside, casting a soft amber glow over the tiny space that comprised my living room and kitchenette. It was tidy but obviously cheap. A second-hand sofa, a scuffed coffee table, minimal decorations beyond a few travel photos, and a postcard of Florence on the wall. For a heartbeat, embarrassment flushed through me. I was standing in my humble little life with a man who likely lived in a mansion. Dante stepped in after me, his broad shoulders nearly brushing the doorframe. He surveyed my apartment swiftly, checking corners and windows with practiced vigilance before seeming to relax slightly. He said nothing about the space, only turned to face me. We were alone now. Vincenzo had stationed himself at the street door, I realized. He hadn't followed us up. So it was just Dante and me in the hush of my apartment, the air thick with everything unspoken between us. I set my keys on the table with a clatter that sounded too loud. I faltered, then tried again. "Would you like a glass of water or something?" The absurdity of playing hostess to a Mafia don in my own home struck me even as I said it, but I didn't know what else to do. My upbringing had instilled automatic politeness in me, even under duress. A dark brow arched and something flickered in his eyes. Amusement, perhaps. "No, thank you." "A beat, then. You're surprisingly calm." I wrung my hands together. "I figured if you wanted to hurt me, you would have by now," I said, trying to sound braver than I felt. "Begging you further would only show disrespect. You have my word, and that's all I have to offer." Dante considered me in silence. Then he stepped closer, so close I instinctively backed up until the wall was against my shoulders. He didn't cage me in, not exactly, but his proximity was enough to make me hyper-aware of every breath. "I'm not in the habit of harming innocent women," he said softly, almost a whisper. "But trust is earned slowly, Elena. You say all you have to offer is your word. Fortunately for you. And I value loyalty and honesty. Prove to me I can trust you, and you'll have nothing to fear." His gaze bored into mine, and I felt the compulsion to look away, but I held it this time, sensing that shrinking from him now would undermine the strength I'd just shown. How can I prove it?" I asked quietly. His eyes flickered over my face, perhaps noting the genuine confusion in my expression. "By living your life. Continue working at La Fenice. Keep your routine. Say nothing of what you heard. In time, I'll know if you meant what you promised." Dante reached out and I froze, but he only gently lifted my left hand. I winced as his thumb brushed over the tender inside of my wrist, where faint bruises were forming. His face darkened subtly. "That should not have happened. I apologize for Giorgio's behavior." I blinked in surprise. A Mafia boss apologizing to me? It was likely more about his pride, his man stepping out of line, than concern for my well-being. Still, the unexpected civility threw me. "Thank you," I mumbled. "It's okay. I know it was an accident." Dante made a soft sound that might have been disagreement, but didn't correct me. He released my hand. As he did, his fingers brushed my palm lightly. A strange warmth curled in my stomach at that brief contact, inexplicable under the circumstances. I told myself it was just relief beginning to take hold, that I was going to emerge from this night alive. He stepped back, finally granting me some breathing room. One more thing. From inside his suit jacket, he pulled a small card and extended it to me. I accepted it. A phone number, printed with no name. My fingertips tingled, recognizing this as a direct line, likely to him. "If anything unusual occurs, if anyone approaches you about tonight, call that number. Immediately, day or night." Dante's tone brooked no argument. "That includes if the police come with questions. You call me. I'll handle it. I nodded dumbly, tucking the card in my pocket. I hoped never to use it. Dante turned to leave, then paused at my door, hand resting on the frame. He glanced back at me, and for the first time that night, I saw something other than cold control in his expression. It was fleeting, gone almost before I registered it, but it looked like reluctance. "Buonanotte, Elena," he said quietly. "Stay out of trouble." And with that ambiguous parting, Dante Accardi stepped out of my home. I released the breath I'd been holding, knees almost buckling with relief as I heard his measured footsteps retreat down the stairs. Only when I heard the distant sound of the building's front door closing did I dare to move to my window. With a trembling hand, I pulled the curtain aside just enough to peer down at the street. The black Maserati remained, engine idling. I saw Dante emerge from the stairwell and stride to the car. Vincenzo opened the back door for him. Before getting in, Dante lifted his head, as if sensing my gaze. Even from 3 stories up, my heart lurched, and I jerked back behind the curtain, letting it fall shut. Had he seen me watching? Probably. I pressed my back to the wall, chest heaving. Stupid Elena. The last thing I wanted was for him to think I was spying on him now of all times. I waited several minutes before peeking again. The curb was empty. Only then did the reality crash down on me. I had stepped into the lion's den tonight, and somehow walked out intact. But I had a feeling this would not be the last I saw of Dante Accardi. And a quieter, more honest part of me whispered that it was not only fear coursing through my veins in that moment, but a dark thrill as well. I didn't sleep much that night. Even after Dante left, the adrenaline of fear and the bewildering tangle of other emotions kept me pacing my tiny apartment. Each creak of the building made my heart leap, as if his men might return at any moment. But morning came quietly, with no sign of black cars or dark-suited enforcers. The sun through my window was almost an insult, bright, ordinary, as though last night was nothing more than a bad dream. Except for the faint bruises on my wrist and the card with Dante's number tucked under my jewelry box, there was proof it was all too real. I had half a mind to call in sick to work. But what then? If I broke my routine, would Dante interpret that as running? He told me to continue living my life normally. So that's what I tried to do. At the restaurant that evening, I was jumpy and distracted. Marco, my manager, noticed my skittishness. He cornered me near the espresso machine after the dinner rush began. "Elena, what happened last night?" he whispered, concern creasing his forehead. "You left with those men, with him. Are you okay?" His genuine worry touched me, but I remembered Dante's warning. I forced a smile. "I'm fine, Marco. Signor Accardi just wanted to apologize for his associate's behavior. He gave me a ride home, that's all." Marco's eyes widened at the name Accardi. Clearly he knew of Dante, even if I didn't. "Madonna Santa. Elena, just be careful, yes?" he muttered, running a hand through his thinning hair. "Men like him, it's best not to get involved. If he inquires about you, I'll say you're a good worker and leave it at that. I won't pry, but watch yourself." I nodded, grateful, and he moved off to bark orders at the kitchen staff, leaving me with the unsettling knowledge that Dante's presence loomed larger than I'd realized. For a few days, life resumed a semblance of normality. I worked my shifts, served customers, and avoided thinking too much about that night. It all felt surreal, like a vivid nightmare that fades with the dawn. Perhaps Dante Accardi truly had decided I was no threat, and moved on. I should have been relieved, and I was, or tried to be, but the thing about near-death experiences is that they have a way of gripping you even afterward. In quiet moments, I'd find my mind drifting to him. His face would flash behind my eyes at the most inopportune times. When I was pouring wine at a table, I could see his intense gaze watching me. Or when I turned a dark corner on my walk home, half expecting to see a black Maserati idling at the curb. It was ridiculous. I ought to have been praying never to see that man again. Yet a small, traitorous part of me felt almost disappointed that he hadn't reappeared. That changed at the end of the week. It was a Friday night, La Fenice bustling with patrons finishing late dinners or lingering over dessert. I was clearing a table near the front when the murmurs started, hushed whispers and heads turning toward the entrance. I looked up and nearly dropped the stack of plates in my hands. Dante stood at the maitre d's stand, talking quietly with Marco. He was dressed more casually tonight, if one could call it that. A tailored midnight blue shirt open at the collar and charcoal slacks. Without a full suit, he looked a little less like a distant king and more like a dangerously handsome mortal. But he still carried that aura of power that made people stare and then pointedly look away. My heart did a strange flip. What was he doing here? Was this a social call or another test? Marco caught my eye across the room and gave a quick nod. signaling me to approach. I set the plates down and wiped suddenly damp palms on my apron before crossing over, trying to steady my breathing. "Buonasera, Signora Cardi," I greeted politely, willing my voice to remain even. It felt as if every patron in the vicinity was sneaking glances at us. "Buonasera, Elena," Dante replied. His voice was civil, almost warm by his standards. He looked at Marco. "I appreciate you accommodating me on short notice. A table for one, perhaps at the back, somewhere private." "Of course, sir," Marco said immediately, and grabbed 2 menus, one for the show of it. He led us toward a small corner table near a side window. It was semi-secluded, often reserved for couples on dates or VIPs who wanted privacy. I trailed a step behind, pulse racing. Dante had set a table for one. Was someone joining him? Or was the second menu for me? Surely not. I was working. Once we reached the table, Marco placed the menus and offered a bright smile. "Can I send over a bottle of our Amarone for you, sir? On the house, to thank you for your continued patronage." Dante inclined his head in polite refusal. "Just water for now." He slid into the booth. "I have a meeting shortly." Marco murmured assent and backed away. His eyes flickered to mine as he left, filled with questions and worry. I tried to telegraph assurance to him with a small nod. When he was gone, I stepped forward to do my duty as server, though my stomach was nodding itself. "May I get you anything to start?" I asked, pulling out my notepad as if this were any normal table. Dante's gaze settled on me, and I felt it like a physical caress, or a burn perhaps. "Sit," he said. I blinked. "Pardon?" He nodded to the seat opposite him in the booth. "Sit with me for a minute. I promise not to keep you from your work too long." A couple at a nearby table were definitely staring now, no doubt wondering why a waiter was being invited to sit with a patron. My cheeks flushed. I'm on shift, signore. I'm not sure Marco won't mind," Dante interjected smoothly, "not if it's me who asked." There was a hint of wryness in his tone, as if fully aware of the weight his request carried. He raised an eyebrow. "Unless you don't want to?" That caught me. He was giving me an out, superficially at least. But turning him down in front of the restaurant, and potentially irking him, was not something I was keen to do. Besides, truthfully, I did want to. My curiosity had been smoldering for days. I slid onto the seat, smoothing my apron nervously. "Only for a minute," I agreed quietly. A satisfied glint touched his eyes. He closed the menu, clearly not here for the food. "How have you been, Elena?" The question was so ordinary, yet coming from him it felt profound. "I've been fine," I said carefully, "working, trying to stay out of trouble, as you advised." His lips quirked, almost a smile. Good girl. The praise, if it was that, made a warm tingle of pride rise in me, embarrassingly. Dante continued, his fingers drumming lightly on the closed menu. "I came to ensure that everything is, in fact, all right, that no one has bothered you since our last meeting." I shook my head. No one. Aside from my own overactive nerves, I thought wryly, it's been quiet. "Ben," he studied me, not speaking for a moment. I tried not to fidget under that penetrating gaze. In the background, I heard the soft clink of dishware and murmurs of conversation, but it all felt distant. Here, in this little corner, it was just us. Finally, he broke the silence, voice lower. "You've been on my mind, you know." I looked up, startled. "I have?" Dante chuckled softly. "You sound so surprised. Surely you realize by now that you left an impression." He rested an arm on the back of the booth, leaning slightly closer. "Not many people have the composure you showed after the situation you were put in. Fear, yes, but you didn't completely break." His eyes flickered with something like respect. "That intrigues me." My breath caught. I didn't know how to respond to that. He spoke as if I were some puzzle. I was terrified, I admitted. I still am, to be honest. But I didn't see any other choice except to hold myself together. Falling apart would have gotten me nowhere. Precisely. He nodded as if I'd confirmed a theory. "You have a survival instinct and intelligence." He paused. "And perhaps secrets of your own?" I tensed. "What do you mean?" "A young woman, alone in a city like Naples, far from family." Dante's tone was probing but not unkind. "Your manager told me you came here a year ago from the north. No friends or relatives nearby. That is unusual. I'm curious what you're running from." My mouth went dry. Of course he had looked into me, and Marco must have let slip the basics. I hesitated, fingers twisting in my lap. The easy answer was a lie, that I just wanted a change of scenery, but Dante's sharp gaze told me he would see through that. He valued honesty, he'd said. Perhaps a partial truth would suffice. I moved here to get away from someone, I said at last, keeping my voice low. An ex, he wasn't a good person. I needed a fresh start. Dante's expression darkened subtly. Did he hurt you? I managed a tight smile. Not in ways you could easily see. I subconsciously touched my wrist, remembering different bruises, ones that had long since faded. Rar, I don't mean to be evasive, but I'd rather not talk about him. He's my past. A tense silence fell. I worried I might have annoyed him by shutting down his inquiry, but then Dante gave a single understanding nod. Va bene. For what it's worth, Elena, I know something of running from one's past. His jaw tightened slightly, and I caught a flicker of pain in his eyes before it vanished. Whoever he had been before, whatever had led him to become the man he was now, clearly weighed on him. The thought made him seem more human, and against my better judgment, I felt a pang of empathy. Dante straightened a fraction, as if catching himself. He switched to a lighter topic. The food here, it truly is excellent, isn't it? It sounded almost like small talk, which amused me given the source. I nodded, letting him change the subject. Yes, the chef is Sicilian. He does amazing seafood pasta, and our tiramisu is pretty famous locally. I recall you recommending the tiramisu, actually, Dante said. It took me a second to realize he was referring to the first time we met, when I listed dessert options to the table and specifically highlighted it. It stunned me that he remembered something so trivial from that tense night. Would you like a slice? I offered with a tentative smile. On the house, of course. Chef would be delighted to impress you. His eyes softened just a bit. Perhaps another time. I didn't come to eat, as you guessed. He glanced at his watch, an elegant silver piece that probably cost more than my yearly rent. I have a meeting soon, but I wanted to see with my own eyes that you were okay. Something fluttered in my chest at that. Concern? For me? I'm all right, I assured him. A little more jumpy than before, maybe, but I'm managing. Good. He reached across the table suddenly. I froze as his fingers brushed against a stray lock of my hair that had escaped my ponytail. He gently tucked it behind my ear, an intimate gesture that made my skin heat. I was acutely aware of how public this was, but the corner was dim and mostly out of view. Still, my heart hammered from more than just the risk of being seen. If you ever find you're not managing, Dante said in a low voice, remember you have my number. Use it. I swallowed, unable to break away from his gaze. I will. He lingered a moment, his fingers near my cheek, as if debating something. Then he withdrew, and just like that, the air in my lungs rushed back. Dante slid out of the booth. I should let you get back to work. I moved to stand as well. Part of me wanted to ask him to stay, an absurd instinct, quickly squashed. Thank you for checking on me, Signor Accardi, I said formally, remembering where we were. Dante, he corrected quietly. When we're alone, or not in formal company, you may call me Dante. I blinked. That felt like a significant concession. I nodded. Dante. The name felt dangerous on my tongue in a different way now. He gave me one last long look, something unspoken passing between us in the charged silence. Then he inclined his head politely and turned to leave. Just as he did, his phone buzzed. I stepped aside, pretending to busy myself wiping the table while eavesdropping shamelessly. He answered in Italian, his tone shifting to brisk business. Si, quando? Capisco. His shoulders tensed, the only outward sign of displeasure, but I caught the storm brewing in his dark eyes. One word jolted me. Moretti. Dante's jaw clenched as the voice on the other end continued in an urgent murmur. He responded curtly, keep me informed. I'm on my way. Then ended the call. Dante stood there a moment, his profile taut with whatever news he'd received. He looked angry. No, beyond angry. This was controlled fury, the kind that made the fine lines at the corners of his eyes deepen and his hand curl into a fist at his side. Before I could think better of it, I spoke up. Is everything all right? He turned, as if surprised I'd still be there. For a heartbeat, the mask dropped and I saw something raw in his gaze. Worry, rage, fear. It was gone in a blink, replaced by calm. Nothing for you to worry about, he said, but his voice was a touch strained. He nodded again, more stiffly. Buona notte, Elena. Good night, I caught myself. Good night. I watched as he left the restaurant with purposeful strides. Through the front window, I saw him get into the back of the Maserati that had just pulled up. The car sped off into the night, red taillights gleaming. Only then did I realize I was holding the edge of the table so hard my knuckles were white. I released it and exhaled shakily. The warmth that had blossomed in me from our conversation was now mixed with concern. The mention of Moretti and Dante's reaction could only mean trouble was stirring. That was the second time I'd heard that name, and I doubted it was a coincidence. I recalled the fragment of conversation I'd overheard. Federico won't risk open war. Not yet. My stomach fluttered with unease. Whoever Moretti was, he clearly posed a threat significant enough to put that steely look in Dante's eyes. As I cleared the table and returned to work, I couldn't shake the feeling that a storm was coming. And despite all my efforts to remain uninvolved, I was already being drawn into the winds by the mere gravity of Dante Accardi. The following night, an uneasy calm settled over my routine, like the oppressive stillness in the air before a thunderstorm. I closed up at La Fenice after a quieter shift, my nerves still jangling from Dante's visit and the cryptic trouble that had pulled him away. Marco offered to have the dishwasher, a teenage boy, walk me home. He was clearly still concerned, but I declined as gently as I could. I didn't want to put anyone else in potential danger, however theoretical it seemed. A cool drizzle had begun to fall as I started my trek home. The streets were slick and mostly empty at this late hour. Naples can be eerie at night. The ancient buildings huddle together, and every distant motorbike echo sounds like a pursuer. I clutched my coat tight and kept a brisk pace, my senses on high alert. Perhaps Dante's caution was contagious, or perhaps I simply couldn't shake the feeling of unseen eyes. As I passed into a particularly narrow alley that served as a shortcut, a prickle of dread traveled up my spine. I glanced behind me. Nothing, just shadows dancing under a flickering street lamp. "Get a grip, Elena," I scolded myself. "You've walked this way dozens of times." But the prickle didn't fade. Halfway through the alley, I heard it. A second set of footsteps sloshing in the puddles behind me. Close. Too close. My heart lurched. I spun around, adrenaline surging. A figure emerged from the darkness, and then another. Two men, dressed in dark casual clothes with hoods up against the rain. Not the tailored suits of Dante's men, but something about their purposeful advance set off alarms. "Buonasera, Bella," one called, voice echoing. He lifted his hands placatingly, but it only made them look more like predators cornering prey. "We don't want to scare you. We just want to talk." His accent was local, rough around the edges. I backed up a step, my shoes splashing. "I'm in a bit of a hurry," I said, attempting steadiness. "Maybe another time." The second man circled slightly to my flank, cutting off the way I'd come. My pulse skyrocketed. The first man spoke again, still honeyed malice. "No need to be rude. We have some mutual friends, you and us. Thought maybe you could help us get in touch." Mutual friends? Realization struck cold and hard. This was connected to Dante. I had no doubt. These weren't muggers. They wanted information or leverage. My voice tightened. "I think you've got the wrong person." "Elena, right? Works at La Fenice." The second man chimed in, a nasty smile visible under the street lamp as he said my name. "Yeah, we do our homework. We just have a couple questions about dear Don Accardi. You were awful cozy with him last night, weren't you?" He took a step closer. Instinctively, I stepped back, and my heel hit the alley wall, trapped. My mind raced. They knew Dante had shown interest in me, however small. The traitor in his midst must have fed information fast. If I refused to cooperate, would they hurt me? Likely. If I cooperated, I'd be signing my death warrant with Dante instead. Also unacceptable. I realized with a sick drop in my stomach that no scenario here ended well for me alone. The taller man, the first speaker, reached into his jacket. I glimpsed the black handle of a handgun. My blood ran cold. "See, we're just curious what Accardi might have told you, or given you." He tilted his head. "Maybe he trusts you with things he shouldn't?" "He doesn't," I said quickly, palms raised. Rain dotted my face. "I'm just a waitress. I'm nothing to him. He was just being kind after a misunderstanding. That's all." "Kind, huh?" the second man sneered. "Taking a waitress home and visiting her at work isn't exactly nothing, sweetheart." I felt a wave of nausea. They had been watching, or someone had, perhaps even tonight, trailing me from the restaurant. How long had I been a mark without realizing? My grip tightened around the strap of my handbag. Inside, my fingers brushed the edge of Dante's card, still there since I'd first pocketed it. An idea sparked. Terrifying, but maybe my best hope. "Look," I said shakily, trying to keep them talking. "Even if he did talk to me, Do you really think I'd cross him by telling you? He would kill me. He'd kill all of us. It wasn't an exaggeration. Dante's reputation, even from my limited knowledge, implied ruthless vengeance. Maybe he would, the leader shrugged. Maybe not. Maybe he'll be dead soon anyway. My heart seized. That casual mention of Dante's possible demise made it clear. These men were Moretti's, and they intended to eliminate Dante, one way or another. The man went on. Either way, you should be more scared of us right now, Bella. Talk, and we might let you go. Stay quiet and... He clicked his tongue, the unspoken threat hanging. As he inched closer, I forced myself to meet his eyes. If you hurt me, he'll never forgive it. He'll hunt you. My voice was steadier than I felt. I might just be a waitress, but I'm under his protection. The words felt bizarre coming from my mouth, bold and presumptuous, but I needed to project confidence. They hesitated, exchanging glances. Perhaps they didn't expect defiance. The second man scowled. Protection? He barely knows you. Stop bluffing and give us something useful. Instead of answering, I made my move. With trembling hands, I slipped my phone from my coat pocket and pretended to fumble it. In truth, I was using the motion to hide pressing the single speed dial saved there, Dante's number. Thank God I had thought to program it under a fake contact name earlier just in case. Now it was calling, and I prayed he would answer. Don't play games, the first man barked. What did you hear at the meeting? Is he making a move against Don Moretti? Rain mingled with cold sweat on my skin. I don't know, I insisted, which was the truth. I don't know anything about a move. He doesn't confide in me. I'm not part of his world. The second thug lunged forward, fed up with talk. He seized my arm roughly and shoved me against the wet brick wall. Pain jolted through my shoulder. He leaned in, breath sour and eyes pitiless. How about now? Feel like sharing? A crack of thunder sounded in the distance. My thoughts screamed in panic. The call... Had Dante picked up? Even if he had, would he hear anything? The phone was in my hand, pinned between me and the wall, screen probably slick with rain now. In desperation, I cried out loudly, "Let go of me," hoping the phone would pick up my distress. The man slapped a hand over my mouth, smothering my next shout. Tears sprang to my eyes at the sudden terror and the sharp ache where my head hit the wall. Through the ringing in my ears, I vaguely heard a tinny voice. My phone line was connected. A voice was shouting from the ground where the phone had fallen. Dante's voice, I realized dimly, roaring my name. Elena, Elena, rispondi. The thugs heard it too. The one holding me cursed. The other bent to grab my phone. But before he could, a new sound cut through the alley. The screech of tires and an engine revving hard. In a heartbeat, the mouth of the alley lit up with twin headlights. A car barreled in, brakes squealing as it halted. A black Maserati, Dante's car. Relief and fear warred inside me at the sight. Everything happened in a blur then. The man holding me spun, drawing his gun, but a gunshot rang out from the car. The side window was down. Dante himself was leaning out, a pistol in hand. The thug yelped and dropped his weapon, clutching at his arm. He'd been hit with precise aim. The other attacker returned fire at the car, a thunderous bang in the alley. I screamed, ducking instinctively. The bullet pinged off metal. In the next second, Dante was out of the car, fury emanating from him like a dark aura. Two more of his men poured out from the front seats, Vincenzo among them, guns raised. "Stai fermo!" Dante shouted, advancing like death incarnate. The thug who had grabbed me backed away, holding his bleeding arm. The second one hesitated, gun wavering. Against 3 armed opponents, their bravado faltered. I pressed myself against the wall, shock rendering me useless for the moment. Dante's eyes flickered to me, checking I was alive, then zeroed in on the men with a murderous glint. "Big mistake," he growled at them in a low, deadly tone. "Did Moretti send you? Or are you freelancing idiots?" One attacker bolted, the uninjured one, sprinting deeper down the alley into the maze of lanes. Vincenzo moved to pursue, but Dante barked, "No, stay with her," pointing at me. Vincenzo immediately placed himself between me and the direction of the runner, gun trained forward. The wounded thug tried to drop to his knees, perhaps to plead, but Dante was on him. In a swift motion, he slammed the man against the wall, the same spot I'd been pinned moments ago. Dante pressed his forearm to the man's throat, gun shoved under his jaw. The ferocity in Dante's face was terrifying. I saw in that moment the true ruthless predator he was reputed to be. "Answer me!" Dante hissed. Who sent you? Fuck you, the man spat, one hand still on his bleeding bicep. He tried to seem defiant, but his voice shook. Dante's expression turned almost pitying. Wrong answer. With a sickening thud, he drove his fist into the man's gut. The thug doubled over with a wheeze. Dante hauled him upright again, patience clearly gone. Federico Moretti sent you, yes? The thug coughed, finally nodding frantically. See, yes, he wanted information, didn't tell us you'd come so fast, he groaned. A bitter smirk twisted Dante's lips. You thought I'd leave her defenseless? Stupido. He released the man's throat, only to crack the butt of his pistol across the thug's temple in a brutal strike. The man crumpled to the ground, unconscious or worse. Dante looked ready to finish him off entirely. Dante, I gasped, stepping forward impulsively. My knees were shaking, but I managed to stand. Let's just go, please. The alley had become a war zone in seconds. I couldn't stomach the idea of more blood, even if this man had meant me harm. His head snapped in my direction, eyes wild. For a fraction of a second, I thought he might not even recognize me in his fury, but then he blinked, reality returning. He lowered the gun, breathing hard. The thunder rumbled again overhead, and the rain fell steadier now, drenching us all. Vincenzo moved swiftly, securing the fallen thug's weapon and checking his pulse. Alive, he grunted. Dante nodded curtly. Tie him up and put him in the car. We'll deal with him later. To another guard, the driver who now approached, he jerked his chin. Find the other one. Alive or dead, I don't care. As his men sprang into action, Dante strode toward me. My heart was still in my throat. He stopped just an arm's length away, eyes raking over me as if to assure himself I was unharmed. Without a word, he took off his jacket and draped it over my shoulders. Only then did I realize I was shivering violently, from shock, or cold, or both. His jacket was warm and smelled of him, a mix of that woodsy cologne and something darker. Are you hurt? He demanded, voice rough but quiet. I shook my head, unable to find my voice immediately. I was rattled, yes, but beyond bruises and a likely bump on the head, I seemed intact. A sob bubbled up unexpectedly in my throat, and I clamped it down. I'm okay, I managed. Dante's jaw was clenched so tight I thought his teeth might crack. They won't touch you again, he swore, low and deadly. I promise you that. I believed him. Irrationally, in that moment, I felt safer with this dangerous man than I had ever felt walking these streets alone. A tear escaped one eye, mixing with the rain on my cheek. Dante's expression softened just a fraction. He lifted a hand, and for a second hovered, as if unsure, before gently brushing the tear away with his thumb. The tenderness of the gesture nearly undid me entirely. Come, he said. I'm taking you somewhere safe. I didn't protest. There was little left for me here tonight except fear and uncertainty. If Dante said he'd keep me safe, I was in no position or mindset to argue. He guided me toward the car, where Vincenzo had finished trussing the unconscious thug and unceremoniously shoved him into the trunk. The driver returned, shaking his head to indicate the other pursuer had escaped into the warren of alleys. Dante's face darkened, but he wasted no time ushering me into the back seat once more. As the Maserati roared away, I huddled in Dante's jacket, the reality of what just happened beginning to crash down on me. Dante was on the phone already, issuing rapid orders in Italian to someone, likely mobilizing more of his forces to track down the runner and to tighten security elsewhere. I caught fragments, tried to grab her, one in custody, find Carlo, have him meet at the villa, and the repeated name Moretti spat like a curse. When he finally ended the call, an intense silence settled between us. Streetlights flashed across his face. He looked furious, yes, but beneath it I detected worry. His hand, still holding the phone, was trembling slightly. For all his control, the thought of what nearly happened clearly affected him. I mustered a weak voice. I'm sorry. I called you. I didn't know what else to do. To my surprise, Dante took my hand. He squeezed it firmly, grounding me. You did exactly what you should have, he said, his tone softening. And thank God I picked up. When I heard you scream. He trailed off, unable to finish. Instead, he lifted my hand to his lips and pressed a kiss to my knuckles, an old-fashioned gesture that made my breath catch. You're safe now, he murmured. I'm here. My heart twisted strangely at his words and the gentle contact. I should have been questioning everything, my life choices, the sanity of going with him deeper into his dangerous world. But all I felt in that moment was relief and a burgeoning trust. I squeezed his hand back, not knowing what to say, and settled against the leather seat, exhaustion and adrenaline leaving me shaky. Dante didn't let go of my hand for the remainder of the drive. We sat like that as the city lights blurred by, locked in a silence that felt oddly comforting. No matter what storm awaited with Moretti and the criminal underworld, right now, in this car, I felt a calm in Dante's presence that defied logic. I closed my eyes, Dante's warmth by my side and his jacket around me, and allowed myself to believe, for just a little while, that I truly was safe. The Maserati sped through the outskirts of Naples, and then beyond, climbing into the hills overlooking the bay. Dante's estate, a sprawling villa tucked behind high walls and iron gates, loomed out of the rain like something out of an old film. I barely registered the grandeur as we drove through the gates. I was running on fumes of adrenaline and shock. Stone statues of angels and lions watched from the driveway as we pulled up to the main house. Warm light glowed in a few windows, and the silhouettes of armed guards were visible patrolling the grounds. It struck me that Dante had been readying for war. His home was a fortress now. Dante helped me out of the car, keeping a steadying arm around me. My legs felt like jelly. Inside, the villa was all marble floors and high ceilings, an opulent mix of modern luxury and old Italian charm. A worried-looking older woman in an apron appeared in the foyer as we entered, perhaps a housekeeper. She gasped when she saw the state of us, drenched and disheveled, and the streak of blood on Dante's cuff from the alley scuffle. "Dio mio, Dante! Che è successo?" she exclaimed, eyes wide as she took in the scene. Her gaze darted to me and back to him. Dante shook his head, a silent indication not to fuss. "Non è niente, Teresa," he said quietly. "We had some trouble. Can you please prepare a room for Elena and bring some dry clothes?" Teresa's concerned eyes fell on me, and in that moment I saw more than just an employee's worry. There was genuine care in her expression, almost motherly. "Certamente," she nodded briskly, switching to English for my sake. "Miss, come with me. We'll get you warm and dry." I looked to Dante uncertainly. He gently squeezed my hand before letting go. "Go with Teresa," he urged. "I need to make arrangements for security. I'll come find you shortly. You're safe here." His reassurance, coupled with the domestic normalcy of a housekeeper clucking over me, eased some of my tension. I followed Teresa upstairs, leaving Dante in the foyer where Vincenzo awaited further orders. Teresa led me to a beautiful guest bedroom at the end of a quiet hall. She turned up the thermostat and pulled plush towels and a robe from an ensuite bathroom. As she fussed, bringing out a first aid kit and insisting I get out of my wet clothes, I assured her I was all right. She gave me a knowing look. "Signor Dante, he is a good man," she said, as she laid fresh clothes, a soft sweater and leggings that likely belonged to a female relative of Dante's, on the bed for me. "Nia, he will keep you safe. Don't worry. I've known him since he was a boy." Her kind smile and unwavering confidence in him was both comforting and surprising. She must have seen the chaos in his life up close, and yet trusted him implicitly. I thanked her quietly. Once alone, I peeled off my soaked dress and stood under the hot shower. As water pounded over me, the events of the night finally caught up. I started shaking uncontrollably, tears mixing with the water. It was as if now that I was safe behind these walls, my body allowed itself to feel the fear it had been suppressing. I muffled my sobs into my hands, releasing the terror, relief, and confusion in equal measure. After a few minutes, I regained control, reminding myself I truly was safe for now. I toweled off and dressed in the borrowed clothes, which were a tad loose but clean and warm. The girl in the mirror looked back at me with red-rimmed eyes and a new bruise forming on her temple from where I'd been struck, a souvenir of the night. I gingerly applied a bit of ointment from the first aid kit to the scrape on my cheekbone and took a few steadying breaths. When I emerged, I found Teresa had left a tray on the bedside table with a teapot and a plate of biscotti. The simple kindness nearly brought tears again. I sipped the chamomile tea gratefully, letting its warmth spread through me. Gradually, the trembling in my limbs subsided. A soft knock at the door drew my attention. "Elena," came Dante's voice from the other side. I set down the teacup. "Come in." He entered, having shed his wet shirt for a black sweater. His hair was damp from a quick shower as well, and without the suit, he looked more approachable, though no less striking. His eyes immediately scanned me for injuries, lingering on the bruise at my temple and the bandage I had placed on a small cut at my hairline. "I'm all right," I said preemptively, offering a slight smile. Headache, that's all. Dante's jaw tightened as he stepped closer. They hurt you. It wasn't a question, but a statement laced with anger and guilt. Just a little. It could have been much worse if you hadn't come, I reminded him gently. Thank you, by the way. You saved my life. Twice now, I think. He shook his head. I should never have let it come to that. I underestimated Moretti's reach. That won't happen again. His hand hovered near my face, as if wanting to touch the bruise, but hesitant. May I? I nodded. His fingertips brushed my temple lightly, examining the swelling. Even that small touch sent a shiver through me, but not from pain. Being alone with him in this quiet room, after all the intensity, felt more intimate than anything before. I'm sorry, he murmured, surprising me. His eyes met mine, sincere and haunted. Tonight, you were dragged deeper into my world than I ever intended. You shouldn't have had to see that violence, to be in that kind of danger. It's not your fault that 2 criminals attacked me, I said firmly. They did that, and the one who betrayed you did that. Not you. I hesitated, then placed my hand over his where it still rested near my cheek. Besides, I made my choice when I called you. I knew the risks. At least some of them. A rueful smile touched my lips. I suppose in a strange way, I trust you more than the unknown. Dante looked at me with something like wonderment. You trust me after knowing what I am, what I'm capable of? He sounded almost incredulous. I swallowed. I don't know everything about you, but I know you'd never hurt me, and tonight you showed me that I'd rather have you on my side than anyone else in the world. My cheeks warmed at my own bold words, but they were true. Dante had become my fiercest protector, and frightening as his world was, I felt safer with him than without. A muscle in his jaw twitched. He slipped his hand from under mine, only to cup my cheek fully, his thumb tracing a feather-light path near the corner of my eye. Or I will keep you safe, Elena, he said, voice low and rough. Whatever it takes, you have my word. There was such conviction and emotion underlining those words that I couldn't doubt him. My heart gave a traitorous flutter. We were standing very close now. I could feel the warmth radiating off his body, smell the clean scent of his soap mixed with the deeper spice of the man himself. Dante, I whispered, unsure what I meant to follow with. Perhaps I wanted to ask what now, or why he cared so much, but the words tangled with the thickening silence between us. His gaze dropped to my lips. My breath hitched. Time seemed to slow as he leaned in imperceptibly. Was he about to kiss me? Did I want him to? My pounding heart was a resounding yes, even as logic warned me of the complications. A sharp knock at the doorframe made us jump apart. It was Vincenzo, looking apologetic but urgent. Boss, he said in Italian, inclining his head respectfully, but with a furrowed brow of concern. Carlo is here. He says it's important. Dante exhaled slowly. The moment shattered. I stepped back, trying to hide the flush I knew painted my cheeks. Business. Of course. His world never truly sleeps, especially in crisis. I'll be there, Dante responded. Vincenzo left as swiftly as he'd come. Dante turned to me, regret in his eyes. I'm sorry. I have to deal with something. Carlo has intel, likely about the leak on my side. He hesitated, then added, Will you be all right for a while? Teresa is downstairs if you need anything. And there's security everywhere around the house. I managed a reassuring nod. I'll be fine. Go. This is important. He lingered an instant longer, his hand squeezing mine in a silent promise. Then he was gone, leaving me standing in the soft glow of the guest room, equal parts relieved and aching from his absence. As the door closed, I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. My heart was still fluttering from the near kiss that had been interrupted. Touching my cheek where his hand had been, I felt simultaneously warm and bereft. Sliding into the armchair by the window, I sipped the remaining lukewarm tea and tried to quiet my mind. Outside, the storm had passed, the rain reduced to a gentle patter against the glass. The villa was quiet, but somewhere distant I thought I heard raised voices for a moment, perhaps Dante and Carlo discussing whatever betrayal had occurred. I couldn't make out words, just muffled intensity. I hoped, for Dante's sake, they found the mole responsible for tonight. Seeing the controlled rage on his face as he dealt with those thugs, I knew any traitor in his ranks would face worse, and a part of me, deep down, almost wanted that vengeance for him. Dante carried so many burdens. One of them shouldn't be a disloyal confidant stabbing him in the back. As fatigue pulled at me, I settled deeper into the chair. Before I knew it, my eyes slipped shut, the adrenaline crash finally demanding its due. In the safety of Dante's home, my body capitulated to exhaustion, and I drifted into a restless sleep, haunted by shadowy figures and a pair of dark, protective eyes watching over me. I woke to the sound of raised voices echoing down the hallway. Disoriented, I realized I'd dozed off in the armchair. A glance at the clock on a nearby dresser showed it was past 2 a.m. For a moment, I thought I'd dreamt the shouting, but then it came again, muffled by walls but unmistakably angry. Dante's voice and another man's. I stood, heart lurching. Something was very wrong. The house, which had been still, now thrummed with tension. I cracked open the bedroom door and peered into the hallway. Light spilled from a doorway at the far end. The study, perhaps. Shadows shifted. A thud sounded, like something heavy hitting a wall. Panic seized me. I thought of Dante facing some new threat. Perhaps Moretti had come, or another assassin. Without overthinking, I hurried down the corridor. As I neared, I recognized one of the voices arguing with Dante. It was the older man from the restaurant, the one who had grabbed my wrist. Giorgio. My blood ran cold. What was he doing here? The study door was ajar. I crept to it and peered in. The sight made me gasp softly. Dante was standing by his desk, fury etched on his face. Carlo, whom I had not formally met but guessed was the broad-shouldered man near the door, held a gun leveled at Giorgio. Giorgio himself looked disheveled, a cut bleeding above his brow. It seemed a struggle had already occurred. Vincenzo was there too, blocking the window as an exit. "You lying traitor," Dante said in a low, deadly voice that sent chills through me. "After all my family did for you, after I treated you like an uncle, this is how you repay us? By crawling to Moretti?" Giorgio sneered, though I could see fear in his eyes. "Your father would have never let things come to this," he spat. He knew how to show respect. He practically snarled the word. "You are a whelp trying to play a man's game. Moretti understands the old ways." "He promised me—" Dante moved so fast I barely registered it. One moment he was behind the desk, the next he had crossed the room and struck Giorgio across the face with the back of a pistol. Giorgio reeled, hitting a bookcase and slumping to the floor. Carlo flinched but kept his gun trained, eyes on Dante for the signal. "Promised you what?" Dante roared, standing over the cowering man. "What did he offer that's worth betraying the family you've served for decades? Money? Power?" Giorgio wiped blood from his lip, laughing hollowly. "Survival, boy." He glared up at Dante with a mix of spite and twisted regret. "You're too stubborn to see it. Moretti is going to win. I chose the winning side while I still could. I advised your father to do the same before he got himself killed. But you, Acardis, too proud. Look where pride gets you." Dante went deathly still. Something in Giorgio's words hit a nerve, mention of his father, perhaps. When he spoke again, his voice was eerily calm. "Did you have a hand in my father's death?" Giorgio's face contorted. "I told him to make peace with Moretti. He refused. If you're asking if I pulled the trigger, no. But I didn't cry over his grave, either. He was a fool, and you're on the same path." His gaze flicked toward the doorway then, catching sight of me half-hidden. "And now you've got a weakness. Pretty little thing, isn't she? Should have stayed out of it, girl." My heart lurched. Dante followed Giorgio's line of sight and saw me. Alarm and anger flashed in Dante's eyes. "Elena, go back," he began, but it was too late. With a snarl, Giorgio used Dante's brief distraction. In one swift motion, he pulled a small knife from his boot and lunged upward at Dante. I screamed as the blade arced. Dante jerked back, but not fast enough. Giorgio slashed a line across Dante's side just under the ribs. Dante grunted in pain, stumbling. Carlo shouted and rushed forward, but Giorgio was desperate. He lunged again, aiming for Dante's chest this time. Dante caught Giorgio's wrist, the knife hovering inches from his heart. They grappled. Dante's face contorted in pain and effort as blood started to seep through his sweater. I didn't think, I just reacted. Without hesitation, I pushed the door fully open and ran into the room. There was a heavy crystal paperweight on the desk. I snatched it up. Before Giorgio could register me, I swung it hard against the side of his skull. The crack was sickening. Giorgio crumpled, knife clattering from his hand. Dante staggered back, catching himself on the edge of the desk, one hand pressed to his bleeding side. Everything froze for a heartbeat. The knife lay at my feet. Giorgio was on the floor, either unconscious or dead, I couldn't tell. Carlo rushed to restrain him anyway, kicking the knife away and checking for a pulse. Vincenzo hurried to Dante's side. Dante's eyes were on me. Through the haze of pain, his gaze burned with a mix of relief, shock, and something deeper. "Elena," he breathed. I realized I was shaking, the paperweight still in my hand. I dropped it with a thud, and it rolled across the carpet. My vision blurred with tears as I saw Dante injured, blood darkening his clothing. I ran to him. "You're hurt. Oh God, you're bleeding. We need to get you to sit down." Vincenzo was already pressing a cloth from the desk onto Dante's wound. Dante waved him off weakly. "I'm fine," he insisted, though his wince betrayed him. "Boss, you need stitches," Carlo said, still gripping a limp Giorgio by the collar. "We should call the doctor." Dante nodded vaguely, eyes not leaving me. "Do it, and secure him." He gestured at Giorgio, who was moaning now. "Alive, then. I want him alive to answer for everything." Carlo dragged Giorgio out of the study, barking orders at some other men who had appeared in the hall. Vincenzo quietly exited to fetch the doctor. In moments, Dante and I were alone in the study, save for the faint sounds of activity as the household mobilized around the emergency. I guided Dante to the leather chair behind the desk. He sank into it with a stifled groan. Blood glistened on his hand where he clutched his side. I knelt beside him, adrenaline making me oddly calm. "Lift your hand, let me see," I said softly. He obeyed, grimacing. The cut was a few inches long along his ribs, oozing red. Not immediately life-threatening, but deep enough to need proper care. I pressed the cloth back firmly. Dante inhaled sharply at the pressure. "Sorry," I murmured. He shook his head. "No, it's all right." His voice was strained. One hand rested on my shoulder, as if to steady himself, or to reassure me. "Elena, you shouldn't have been in here," he said. But his tone lacked heat, replaced by worry. "If he'd hurt you?" I swallowed the lump in my throat. "I heard yelling. I was afraid you were in danger. I knew you were. How could I stay away?" A faint, rueful smile tugged at his lips. "You saved my life," he said, astonishment coloring his words. "Again, it seems we are even." I managed a shaky laugh that was half a sob. "I'd rather we stop trading rescues under violent circumstances." The smile faded as he studied me, his expression turning solemn and haunted. "You could have been killed," he whispered, voice raw. "And not just tonight. Because of me, Elena. Because you know me. I'm so sorry." I reached up, placing my fingers gently against his lips to hush him. Don't apologize. I knew the risks, remember? I'd do it again." He closed his eyes briefly, as if absorbing my words. When he opened them, the depth of emotion there took my breath away. "I don't understand you," he said in a rough whisper. "You should hate me for all of this. Fear me. But instead you... He broke off, voice choked. I realized with a start that his lashes were damp. He was holding back tears. Dante Accardi, the Mafia boss feared by so many, was on the verge of breaking down. It shattered something inside me to see it. I moved without thinking, wrapping my arms around him as best I could in the chair. His body tensed at first in surprise. Then he let out a shuddering breath and leaned into me, careful of his wound. His larger frame folded toward mine, head lowering until his forehead rested against my collarbone. I felt hot droplets on my skin where his face pressed, and realized he was silently crying, and one of his arms curled around my waist, clutching me as if I was the only solid thing in his world. "Dante," I whispered, running a hand through his dark hair soothingly. I'd never seen anyone so strong look so broken. All I wanted was to take that pain away, to shelter him as he'd sheltered me. He made a strangled sound, neither word nor sob, but it conveyed anguish and yearning all the same. Then, in a voice muffled against me, he asked quietly, "Can you hug me for 2 minutes?" The words were plaintive, almost childlike in their vulnerability. My heart cracked wide open. I tightened my embrace immediately. "For as long as you need," I answered softly, holding him close. I stroked the back of his head, his hair damp with sweat. He trembled slightly in my arms, and I realized this might be the first time in years that Dante had allowed himself to be this vulnerable with anyone. We stayed like that well beyond 2 minutes. Time lost meaning as I cradled him. Eventually, his shaking subsided. He lifted his head, and I saw unshed tears in his eyes, and a profound gratitude and love in his expression. He framed my face with his hands, gaze searching mine. There was so much he wanted to say. I could feel it in the way his fingers trembled on my skin. Perhaps it was too soon, too chaotic to speak of feelings explicitly. but in that gaze I read everything. The fear of losing me, the relief that I was here, the wonder that I cared for him despite it all. Gently, I wiped a tear from his cheek. He caught my hand and turned his face to press a fervent kiss into my palm. The intensity of that simple act stole my breath. "Elena," he murmured, voice low and thick with emotion. He hesitated, then simply said, "Thank you," but I sensed those words carried depths unspoken. A warm flush spread through me. I knew what he meant. "Always," I replied softly. We were inches apart. The air between us crackled with an intimacy that had been building for days, ignited fully by the rawness of the moment. His eyes flickered to my lips, and this time, I closed the distance. Our lips met in a tender, aching kiss. Dante inhaled sharply through his nose, as if surprised, then responded with equal fervor. His mouth moved against mine, gently at first, then with growing passion that belied the injury and exhaustion. I poured all the solace and affection I had into that kiss, hoping he could feel it. Feel that he wasn't alone, that someone cared deeply for the man beneath the Mafia king. When we finally parted, both breathless, Dante rested his forehead against mine. His dark eyes were closed, as if savoring the closeness. "I don't deserve you," he whispered. I hushed him, brushing a thumb over his lips. "Just stop. Let me decide what you deserve." I gave a tiny smile. "Right now, you deserve to have your wound looked at, and then to get some rest. You've had a hell of a night." He chuckled hoarsely, a ghost of his usual confidence returning. "Perhaps you're right." He winced as if just remembering the gash in his side. The doctor, as if on cue, hurried footsteps approached. I helped Dante stand. He swayed and bit back a groan. The adrenaline crash was hitting him hard now. I slipped an arm around his waist to support him, just as Teresa and a bespectacled older man with a medical bag entered. "Signor Dante, Gesù, you should be lying down," Teresa scolded gently, clearly relieved to see him upright, but distressed at the blood. The doctor immediately took charge, guiding Dante to a nearby couch. "Please give us some space while I stitch him up," he told me kindly but firmly, indicating I should step back. I realized my hands and dress were stained with Dante's blood. Numbly, I nodded and backed away a few paces. Dante reached out and caught my fingers briefly before I retreated completely. "I'm not going anywhere," I promised quietly. He nodded, letting me go. I watched from a respectful distance as the doctor began tending Dante's wound. Dante sat rigid, eyes occasionally flitting to me as if to check I was still there. I offered him an encouraging smile each time. My mind swirled with all that had happened. Giorgio's betrayal, Dante's breakdown, our kiss. It was a lot to process, but one thing shone clear. I was in love with him. Perhaps I'd been falling since the first night, but tonight removed any doubt. And I strongly suspected he felt the same, even if neither of us dared put it into words yet. As the doctor worked, and Teresa fussed over Dante like a worried mother hen, I slipped out into the hall for a moment to catch my breath. My own emotions were overwhelming me in waves. I realized I was still wearing Dante's bloodied jacket and sweater from earlier, now further stained. But I hardly cared. Carlo was standing guard by the door, and he gave me a respectful nod. "Signorina," he said softly, "they have the traitor locked in the cellar. He'll face justice soon. Signor Dante will want to speak with him when he's able." I nodded, exhaustion hitting me anew. "Thank you, Carlo. I'm glad you're safe," he added, a flicker of a smile on his stern face. "The boss, he cares for you deeply, you know." I felt my face warm. "I care for him too," I said quietly. Carlo seemed satisfied by that. He turned his attention back to watch, and I returned to the study, just in time to see the doctor finishing the bandage around Dante's torso. "He'll need rest," the doctor was saying. "No strenuous activity for a few days at least. The stitches should hold well. I left something for pain." Dante was already trying to shrug off the fuss. "Grazie, dottore," he said. Upon seeing me re-enter, his posture relaxed fractionally. Within a few more minutes, the doctor and Teresa departed, leaving us alone again. Dante gingerly stood, one arm pressed to his bandaged side. I went to him immediately, looping his other arm over my shoulders to support his weight. "Let's get you to bed," I whispered. He didn't protest. In fact, he leaned on me more than I expected, a sign of how spent he truly was. I led him out of the study and down the hall to his master bedroom. Teresa must have shown me the way earlier, or maybe it was instinct, but I found it easily. The room was dimly lit, dominated by a large bed. I sat him on the edge of the bed and helped ease his shoes off. He attempted a joke, "Careful, or I'll start thinking you plan to tuck me in every night," but it was strained by pain and fatigue. I simply smiled and pulled the covers back. "Lie down, tough guy." With my help, he managed to recline, stifling a groan as the movement tugged at his stitches. Once he was settled on pillows, he reached for my hand. "Stay," he murmured, the single word filled with so much need that my chest ached. I climbed onto the bed beside him, fully clothed and uncaring. He drew me gently against his uninjured side. I rested my head on his shoulder, careful of the bandage, and draped an arm across his chest. His heartbeat was steady under my cheek, a reassuring rhythm. He let out a content sigh as he held me. In the safe cocoon of his arms, I felt sleep pulling at me again. Dante pressed a tender kiss to my forehead. "Buonanotte, Elena," he whispered. I tilted my face up to steal one more soft kiss from his lips. "Good night, Dante." As I closed my eyes, I knew that come morning, the world outside this room would rush back in. Rivalries, responsibilities, uncertainties. But for that night, we existed only in each other's arms, finding solace and unexpected love amidst the darkness. The morning light brought a false sense of peace. I woke in Dante's bed wrapped in his arms, the events of the night before momentarily distant. For a few precious moments, we were just two people holding each other, sharing gentle morning whispers. Dante's wound throbbed, but he brushed off concern, more focused on tucking a strand of hair behind my ear and murmuring how beautiful I looked at dawn. I blushed, laughing softly that he must still be lightheaded from blood loss to say such things. But reality intruded swiftly. A knock at the door. Carlo with urgent news. Moretti had gone to ground with his loyalists. Rumors swirled he was enraged by Giorgio's failure and planning something desperate. There was also news that the thug who escaped the alley had identified Dante's villa to Moretti. A retaliation strike was likely. The war was not over. Dante's face hardened as he absorbed the updates. In that instant, the tender lover of Dawn was replaced by the Mafia Don preparing for battle. He thanked Carlo and immediately began issuing orders. I sat up, anxiety coiling in my gut. Dante turned to me, apology and determination in his eyes. "I have to end this, Elena. Today." "I understand," I replied quietly. My fingers twisted in the sheets. "What should I do?" He crossed to me and took my hands. "I want you far from here. Moretti won't hesitate to target you again. I can't fight if I'm worried about your safety." He nodded to Teresa, who lingered at the door. "Teresa will take you to a safe location, somewhere no one knows about." My heart dropped. Leave? Now? I tightened my grip on his hands. "No, I'm not leaving you, Dante." His jaw clenched. "Elena." I stood, ignoring the tremor in my legs. "Last night you told me to trust you and you would keep me safe. I do trust you. But you have to trust me too. We face this together. I'm not a coward, and I won't run and hide while you risk everything." His eyes flashed with emotion. Fear, frustration, love. "It's not cowardice. It's common sense," he growled. "If anything happened to you..." I rose on my toes and kissed him, a brief but fierce press of my lips to silence his protest. "You said I was your strength last night. Let me be that now. If you send me away, I'll be a distraction. I'll worry about you, and you'll worry about me. Together we watch each other's backs." Dante rested his forehead against mine, exhaling shakily. "Stubborn woman," he muttered, but I heard the acceptance in his tone. "All right, but you stay by my side, understand? You don't leave my sight." I nodded, relief and resolve flooding through me. "I promise." Within the hour, Dante rallied his most trusted men. A plan was formed. An anonymous tip had placed Moretti at an old countryside winery that his family owned, a place he might use as a last stronghold. Dante intended to confront him head-on, bring an end to the feud by any means necessary. It was risky, but waiting for Moretti to strike on his terms was worse. Despite Dante's protests, I armed myself with a small handgun one of his men provided, and donned a bulletproof vest under a dark jacket. My hands shook, but I steeled myself. I would not be a helpless bystander. Dante only relented when I refused to budge. He gave a tight nod, though worry etched deep lines on his brow. The drive to the winery was tense and swift. I rode with Dante in an armored SUV, Carlo and Vincenzo in the front, 2 more cars of Dante's soldiers trailing. Dante held my hand the entire ride, his thumb tracing circles on my skin as if to reassure us both. He said little, gaze focused and far away, likely anticipating every possible outcome. I squeezed his hand occasionally, a silent message. I'm here. We're doing this. As we approached the remote vineyard, Dante's convoy stopped short of the entrance. The plan was for Dante and a small contingent to approach under a flag of truce. Moretti had tentatively agreed to a meeting when Dante contacted him, likely buying time. We all knew it was a trap. Dante intended to spring one of his own. Stay behind me and Carlo at all times, Dante instructed me in a hushed tone as we exited the vehicle. I nodded. The morning sun was high but offered little cheer. Everything felt cold with dread. We advanced through the rows of gnarled grapevines toward the old stone cellar building. A handful of Moretti's men stood outside, guns visible. Among them, a tall, silver-haired man stepped forward, Federico Moretti. He wore a crisp suit as if hosting a business meeting, but the malevolence in his eyes was unmistakable. "Accardi," Moretti greeted with a thin smile. "I was surprised by your call. I didn't think you had the stomach for a direct confrontation. Perhaps I underestimated you." His gaze slid to me, and his smile widened into a shark-like grin. "Ah, and you brought your little sweetheart. How charming. I heard she packs quite a swing." He touched a bandage on the side of his head. I realized with a jolt that he bore a wound, possibly from the thug I'd brained who must have reported back. Dante bristled but kept his tone civil. "Federico, this ends today. No more games. You return what is mine and we settle this once and for all." Moretti chuckled. "What is yours? Do you mean the territory you stole? Or the dignity? Or perhaps the girl?" He tisked. "You young ones are always so dramatic. You think this is a fairy tale? That you can just walk away with your prize?" His eyes flashed. "Your father thought the same before I shot him." I felt Dante tense like a coiled spring. Carlo beside us tightened his grip on his rifle. Dante's voice came out deadly calm. "You've confessed at last." Moretti shrugged. "Not that it was a secret. Everyone knew but couldn't prove it." "And what will you do? Kill me? There are dozens ready to take my place and hound you forever. Or perhaps you'll die here, and I'll take my victory. Either way, ragazzo, you don't win." In a flash, Moretti signaled his men. The air erupted with the crack of gunfire. Dante cursed and pulled me down behind a low stone wall that edged the path. Carlo and the others returned fire. I clutched the handgun Dante had given me, heart in my throat, as chaos exploded around us. Moretti's men had the advantage of position, firing from the cover of the winery building and cars. But Dante's men flanked out expertly, a fierce firefight commencing among the vines and barrels. Over the din, I heard Moretti shout, "Bring her!" And before I knew it, 2 of his goons who had crept around grabbed me from behind the wall. I screamed, kicking as they dragged me forward. Dante lunged up to follow, but a burst of bullets forced him down. I caught a glimpse of his face, pure terror and fury, as I was hauled into the open yard before Moretti. "Stop shooting!" Moretti commanded. The gunfire ebbed into an uneasy ceasefire. He grabbed me by the arm and yanked me against him, pressing a pistol to my temple. My pulse thundered as I met Dante's eyes across the short distance. He had risen from cover, gun aimed at Moretti, chest heaving. "Drop it, Accardi!" Moretti barked, digging the barrel into my skin. "Or I splatter your lover's brains right here." Dante's face went ashen. Slowly, he bent and set his gun on the ground, raising his hands. Carlo and the others looked poised to intervene, but Dante shouted, "Stand down!" They obeyed, though I saw their reluctance. My mind raced. I had my small gun tucked at my back under my jacket, miraculously not taken in the scuffle. Moretti was fixated on Dante. His attention on me was secondary, just using me as a shield. If I could just get a moment, Moretti sneered, triumphant. "See, Dante, this is what love does. Makes you weak. Your father had it right initially. Family, blood, that's what matters. Women are distractions. And now your distraction will cost you everything." He cocked the gun, the metallic click making my blood freeze. "Any last words before I paint the ground with her?" Dante took a step forward, hands still raised, his eyes locked on mine, voice surprisingly steady. "Federico, you kill her, and you truly have nothing left to bargain with. My men will slaughter you to the last. If you let her go, I will walk away from Naples, cede the territories." "No, I cried out, unable to bear the thought of him sacrificing so much. Moretti growled and tightened his grip, but I seized the distraction. In one swift motion, I reached behind me, grasped the grip of my hidden pistol, and swung my arm upward. A shot rang out, but not from Moretti's gun. My bullet caught him in the shoulder at point-blank range. He howled in pain, his aim on me faltering. I twisted free of his grasp, throwing myself to the ground just as another shot cracked through the air. Dante had retrieved his gun and fired. Moretti staggered, a red bloom spreading on his chest. For a heartbeat, he stayed upright, eyes wide in shock and fury. He tried to raise his pistol toward Dante, but another crack sounded, this time from Carlo, who had a clear line. A second hole punched through Moretti's chest. The old Don crumpled to his knees, then collapsed onto the gravel, gun slipping from his fingers. A silence fell, broken only by the ragged breathing of men and the distant creak of a wind through vines. Moretti's remaining soldiers dropped their weapons or fled into the fields, the fight thoroughly gone out of them with their boss down. I slowly sat up, my ears ringing and heart pounding. It was over. Federico Moretti lay motionless, eyes staring blankly at the sky. My hands began to tremble violently, the gun slipping from my grasp. I had shot someone, a likely kill shot at that. The realization churned in my stomach, and I fought the urge to be sick. But I would process it later. Right now, all I cared about was the man sprinting towards me. Dante fell to his knees at my side, gathering me into his arms. "Are you hurt?" he demanded, voice thick with concern. His hands patted over me as if to assure himself I was intact. I shook my head, tears spilling freely now that the adrenaline was ebbing. "I'm okay. I'm okay." My eyes searched him. He looked exhausted, pained. His side wound had reopened, a red stain visible on his bandages under his vest. But alive, he crushed me against his chest in a fierce embrace. I could feel his heartbeat racing as wildly as mine. Around us, Dante's men secured the area, but it was all distant to me. All I could focus on was Dante's warmth, his heartbeat, the way he kept murmuring, "It's over. Thank God, it's over." I pulled back just enough to see his face. There were tears in his eyes, and he didn't bother to hide them. I realized I was crying as well. Dante cupped my cheeks, wiping my tears with blood-stained thumbs. You are incredible," he said hoarsely. "You saved me, Elena. In every way a person can be saved." A watery laugh escaped me. "We saved each other." He let out a trembling breath, pressing his forehead to mine. "Ti amo," he whispered, the Italian rolling off his tongue with raw honesty. There was no holding back now. No more need for walls. "I love you. I didn't want to admit it. I was afraid, but I do. I love you." A sob of joy broke from my chest. "I love you too, Dante." Saying it felt like a release, the simplest and truest thing in the world amid all the chaos. I kissed him, a soft, tender kiss amid the rubble of conflict, a promise sealed between us. He kissed me back, gently cradling the back of my head as if I were precious. When we broke apart, Dante rested his chin atop my head, holding me as our allies moved around us. I heard Carlo directing men, saw Vincenzo in the distance coordinating cleanup. In the periphery, I noticed some of Moretti's men being taken prisoner without further bloodshed. The war, for now, was won. Dante eventually stood, pulling me up with him, his arm wrapped around my shoulders protectively. His gaze swept over the scene until he found Carlo and Vincenzo. He gave them curt nods of thanks and orders to handle the aftermath. They nodded, and Carlo flashed a brief grin at me, perhaps remembering our conversation about Dante caring for me. He looked pleased as he turned away to work. Dante looked down at me, and though exhaustion lined his face, a tentative smile curved his lips. "Let's go home," he said softly. Home. The word warmed me. I realized I didn't even know exactly what that meant for us. My flat, his villa, somewhere far from Naples perhaps, but I didn't care, as long as we were together. I leaned into him as we walked slowly back toward the cars, my arm circling his waist. "Yes," I murmured. "Let's go home." As we moved forward, I noticed Dante wince, his hand pressed to his reopened wound. I frowned in concern. "You're bleeding through your bandage. We need to get you to the doctor, or Teresa will have our heads." He gave a low chuckle and pulled me a fraction closer, despite his pain. "Whatever comes next, doctors, stubborn housekeepers, rival gangs, we'll face it. Together." His dark eyes shone with that resolute promise. I smiled and rested my head against him as we reached the car. My future was uncertain in so many ways. Loving a mafia boss meant stepping into a world of perpetual shadows and threats. But no matter how dark it became, I knew the light we'd found in each other would guide us through. As Dante helped me into the car and climbed in after, he laced his fingers with mine and brought my hand to his lips, a silent, enduring vow. We had survived the storm, and though more storms would surely come, we would meet them side by side. For now, that was enough. In the quiet between us, I remembered the first gentle question that cracked his armor, the vulnerable man who'd asked for a simple embrace. I squeezed his hand and he met my eyes. And I knew, however many minutes or years the future gave us, we'd hold each other through them all.